Breaking news today. The Ukrainian rail system during the conflict. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was thwarted in large part thanks to the efforts of two organizations. Ukrainian military is one example. It successfully defended Kyiv and has retaken large swaths of territory in the northeast and south that Moscow had seized the previous year. It appears as though there will be yet another counterattack. The second is the Railway of Ukraine, which may come as a surprise to some. This system is the third largest in Europe with 15,000 miles, 24,000 kilometers, of track. The war-torn nation now relies on it to survive. The railway has been instrumental in the evacuation of civilians since Vladimir Putin's invasion. Around 120,000 animals have been transported along with the 4 million passengers. The continent is experiencing the worst refugee crisis since 1945, with 8 million people forced to seek safety elsewhere and 6.2 million forced to seek safety within their own countries. The railways have made another important contribution to the war effort by facilitating the safe return of servicemen to their families. When compared to their demoralized Russian opponents, the morale of Ukrainian soldiers is high. The injured are taken away on special trains. It's a mix of service members and civilians caught in the crossfire. Doctors on the move tend to the sick and injured. During this extraordinary year in which Ukraine has defied Russia, the Dutch photographer and multimedia journalist Jelle Krings has documented the activities of drivers, railway workers, and passengers. His show Iron People features both still images and moving ones, as well as a documentary. The photographs paint a picture of a nation on the move, struggling to maintain its existence, and the effect is stirring, vivid, and at times poignant. Krings, then 32 years old, was in Poland this time last year when Russia launched its all-out attack. He photographed the influx of refugees crossing the border, which averaged tens of thousands per day and consisted primarily of women and children. He traveled to Ukraine in early March to record the plight of refugees arriving in Lviv's central station from the east on refugee trains. Before sending drivers back to the front, he conducted interviews with them. Their bravery and sense of duty astounded me. These heroes were regular people who did extraordinary things to help others. He continued, overnight, they were transformed into emergency responders in a war zone. Last fall he traveled to liberated areas in Kharkiv Oblast and the southern city of Kherson, and in May and June he visited Kharkiv and the Donbass region. Krings met with workers repairing railway tracks in areas recently liberated from Russian mines. He went to repair facilities that the enemy was aiming their missiles at. He photographed rail workers in their homes this year while also listening to their accounts of living under enemy occupation and aerial attack. Ukraine's fortitude and self-assurance are on display in the country's railway system. As Krings put it, you find this across Ukrainian society. The experience of editing his photographs was described as an emotional ride by the photographer. People in the refugee camp are looking out the windows. They look at you with such pain and loss in their eyes. Workers on the railroad risk their lives to aid them. He said, you see and feel everyone's pain. While on a crowded evacuation train, Krings photographed the body of a woman who had collapsed and died. At the Lviv train station, she napped under a blue blanket. He was in Pokrovsk, Donbass, when he saw train workers hoist a 71-year-old woman from her bed and load her onto the train. A carriage transporting aid to the needy was bombed days earlier. He described an explosion followed by smoke billowing above the railroad tracks. Workers from Ukrainian railways, police officers, and Lyudmila Chutko's 47-year-old son Vladimir carry her onto an evacuation train because she has trouble walking due to an accident before the war. She claims they left because the shelling became unbearable and the situation deteriorated. They've spent their entire lives in Kramatorsk, but they had to leave because of the violence there and make a new start in Dnipro. Over the past few weeks, Russian shells have repeatedly hit the city of Pokrovsk. More than 90% of trains in Ukraine are reliably on time. Engine performance has not been impacted by the war because vehicles typically travel at 55 miles per hour. The best way to travel across a large country, carriages are spotless and accommodating. Passengers on the night train are attended to by stewards, who serve them morning tea in delicate holders. Since airports are closed, the railway also serves a political purpose by transporting notable foreign visitors. Joe Biden, Vice President of the United States, visited Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv in February, just days before the anniversary of the invasion. The round-trip time was a full 20 hours. Boris Johnson, Keir Starmer, and Bono from U2 are just a few of the prime ministers and celebrities who have ridden the train. Krings spent his childhood in a small town near Amsterdam. When he was a teenager, he frequently rode the train into the city and back home again after dark. He said the trip took about 10 minutes. It takes 36 hours to travel from Pokrovsk to Lviv due to the greater distances in Ukraine. From Kyiv to Kherson, which Russia had brutally occupied for 8 months, services have resumed. Over 230,000 people have found work in the railroad industry. There have been 300 fatalities since the war began, including 19 on active duty. An occupation with the state-owned company carries social prestige and guarantees regular work schedules. There are families of train workers, often spanning multiple generations. Previously, Krings reported on the refugee crisis and the effects of Africa's climate change. He claims he wants to humanize complicated geopolitical issues and cover them in depth. Krings intends to show his photography as part of a multimedia project in Amsterdam's train stations and museums. Some of it is pretty gruesome. Tatiana Vislohuzova, one of those interviewed, recalled having to evacuate a girl of 11 who had lost both legs in a missile strike. Another 6-year-old boy told the train manager he saw his friend get torn apart during a strike. The people who work on the railroads are truly remarkable and courageous. People on the front lines don't see as much tragedy as they do. So much suffering has occurred. Despite the danger, they continue to visit, Krings said. The publishing house Guardian Faber has released the book by Luke Harding titled Invasion: Russia's Bloody War and Ukraine's Fight for Survival.